Hey, Ryan Dahl here. I'm excited about this. I have Anna Golden on the line, and just meeting her in the last couple of minutes, her personality just radiates, and I am looking forward to this conversation. So join me with Anna Golden. We're going to talk all about the church, all about her great songs, and I think you're going to be super encouraged by this conversation. Here we go. Hello, Anna Golden.
Hello, I am so happy to be here. Thank you for
Oh,
having me.
thank you. Okay, you want to know what I was just doing right before you called in as I was sitting at my computer doing like my favorite thing, editing a chart of Natalie Grant. She's got a
Oh,
version of My Tribute, and it's all these
hmm
like rich chords from her husband, Bernie Herms. I don't know if you
oh,
have little sense of history from that, but oh, I was just like C minor seven, flat
oh my
nine
gosh.
over G flat, and I'm like just carving it up. So that's my
Listen, you're a
favorite thing.
champion. You're a champion for charting anything that Bernie does or arranges.
I know,
He is one
right?
of my favorite people ever. He actually, my last record that I just released, which I'm sure we'll
Yeah,
talk about eventually,
yeah.
we wrote a few of the songs together on there. So actually, him,
You
Natalie, and I
did.
wrote, yeah, we wrote a song called Be Magnified, which is the last
Yeah,
track on the record. And then
yeah.
Bernie and I wrote a song called Psalm 91 and Get Your Glory for this record. So
Mm-hmm.
any of like the creative fun moments chord wise. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's all Bernie. That was
Mm-hmm.
Bernie to the
So
T.
much, so much. Well, my like passion and dream is guys that can sit down at the piano and just sweeten songs up with those rich chords. And
Totally.
so we had our chord charter trying to make sense of these chords. And then I was like, oh, this might be, above your pay grade. So we had to send it to a deeper level arranger. Anyways, if you're listening in, and this has nothing to do with Anna other than that she obviously works together with Natalie, I had no idea. But
Oh, they're the
that
best.
chord
They're the
chart is
best.
coming out in about 20 minutes. But I want to talk about your music. And I was just saying how I lead worship, fairly regularly, mostly to small groups, sitting on a piano all by myself. Sometimes a
I love
band
it.
will join me. And so I'm always looking for songs that I feel work really well when it's just voices and the piano. I mean, it's great when you can add the band and the rhythm section, but I don't like to depend on that, And
Totally.
so your
Totally.
song, What He's Done, I just feel like I could sit at the piano, and even if people don't know that song, by the second verse, they know
Yeah.
it. So that's always the jewel I'm looking for. And then of course it can just explode if you do have a band and a stadium, which I've never experienced singing in a stadium, but you have, and I'd love to hear about that. So, well, tell me even like what is that like to sit on a stage or stand on a stage and have 60,000 people singing a song that you wrote? It just must put shivers down your spine, hey?
Man, it's definitely, I would say that the way that I am and how I lead worship, I get so nervous. People ask me that all the time. They're like, do you still get
Mm-hmm.
nervous? I'm like, yes. But it could be like a
Mm-hmm.
room of 10 and I'm doing a small group and I'll get the same
Mm-hmm.
amount nervous of like doing a stadium like the Benz that's like 60,000 people. But I
Yeah.
would say that the biggest difference is probably how you can hear yourself. I remember recording What He's Done inside the Benz
Yeah.
Stadium and being like, Lord, just please help me stay in time because you're hearing
Yeah.
so even like both your in ears in you're just feeling so much. I'm the kind of worship leader, and I know every sound
Yeah.
guy who's listening to this is going to be like, that's not great. I keep an ear out. So
Oh,
I'm like,
oh,
I
terrible.
want to, I
Okay.
know it's terrible
Yeah.
for yourself, but I'm always like, I want to feel the room. And I'm sure you know that, like
Yeah.
as a worship leader, like I grew up with like wedges and stage monitors,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I've gotten so accustomed to like, oh, I love hearing the voices. I'm like, there's no amount of crowd mics that can give you that feeling. I'm like every sound
No.
person's livid. But anyway, yeah, so it's super different. But man, like seeing so many people connect to this song and even hearing yourself, like
Yeah.
really what I strive to do when I'm writing songs, especially for the church, is something that can be digestible because as like the stadium events are so amazing and they're so cool. The actual average church in America is about 200 people and they maybe see about
Yeah.
75 people on a Sunday. And they
Mm-hmm.
don't run stems, and it's like what you're saying, it's broken
Mm-hmm.
down. It's probably someone who has a full-time job and a family who's
Mm-hmm.
coming in on a Sunday morning reading their praise chart while they're playing it.
Yeah.
And I love to make music that's easy for people to get a hold of, but it's scripturally based, and it's
Yeah.
just something that's truth that they can sing with their congregation over their
Mm-hmm.
church.
Mm-hmm. I do. I love that about your story. I can tell you're a person that, yes, you have these wonderful experiences at a 60,000, person stadium, but the real Anna Golden, and it is even reflective in your recent album called The Church, is like you're all
Hmm.
about that church, and you have your own experience, your own story that I'm sure so many of us can relate to. It's not all, it's not all highs. It's got like lows and wrestles and all of that. And so I wonder if you could maybe take us a little into, how about this? Let's just start with like, what was, take me into the moment where you felt like I belong in this church. I'm not just, some dad's daughter that's holding his hand and, coming to church as a child. Like,
Yeah.
I got a place here. So bring me into that moment when that kind of lit up for you in the church.
Wow, I love that's such a beautiful question. I would say, like you're saying, like as a kid, especially one that was raised in church, like I'm a church baby. Like my parents were both worship leaders. So,
Yeah.
ever since I was a little kid, I was inside the walls of a church. And when you're young, you really borrow your parents' faith. I mean, you don't really understand it all the way, but you start to. And I always say that I feel really fortunate that when I was honestly probably about 11, my church that I grew up in had a prayer room in it, and
Hmm.
my dad and I would go all the time, and we just sit in there. And I really felt the Lord start to draw close to me in a way that felt so personal. And
Hmm.
then through like the ages of like 11 to 14, I really got into scripture. Like I loved worship and I loved music, but scripture was something that was new to me. And I remember I'm always praying. I'm like, Lord, give me a hunger for scripture. Like I was when I was 14, that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to read the
Hmm.
Bible. And just find out more about it and understand the words that were being said and written. And so I think for me, that's when I really got involved in my church, and I started to see how the Lord used the church as his hands and feet. And I mean, it's used by imperfect people, and there were definitely things that happened that I was like, oh, that's kind of crazy. But I
Hmm.
really found it to be such a safe place when I was young. There's so many other places that I could be and things that I could have
Hmm.
been involved in. And I'm so grateful that that was my place of community. That was my where
Hmm.
I made all my friendships. That's where I really got to grow in my gifting. And I think that now I just love seeing young people in church. I love youth ministry in particular because I'm like, man, it's so many kids that come in and are like, hey, I love holding a camera, or I think I can sing. And you get to experience the presence of God through the thing that he blessed you with and gave you.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's something so beautiful about church. So I think probably around middle school is when I was like, okay, I actually love being here. And I
Yeah.
love being here outside of that it's all my friends. I love what I get to experience, like learning the power of prayer so
Yeah.
young. And I feel fortunate that I was a part of a church that had like that house of prayer. And
Hmm.
it kind of taught me intercession young, and taught me that like being a worship leader is actually being an intercessor, and
Hmm.
what that looks like really.
Hmm. Well, you're talking about the prayer room, and so I'm going to be honest. I have a memory of the prayer room in our church, and it was a place I went and cowered down, face to the floor, begging God not to send me back out there for second service because it was so rough. So sorry to be so raw about that, but
That's real. Those moments are so
sometimes
real.
it feels like that. But I wanted to ask you, what's your story? A little bit of what are some of the struggles maybe that you've had, or the more raw moments, or things that you've had to like press through and get to the other side. Can you give us a window into that?
Totally. I mean, I think from when I was a young kid, there's so many things that you deal with within inside the walls of ministry. And I always say like anywhere you go, any job that you have, any workplace is people being people, and there's going to be misunderstandings and there's going to be hurt. But for some reason inside the walls of a church, it just feels so much more violating because it's like,
Hmm.
hey, this is supposed to be the safe place. This is supposed to
Right.
protect me. This is supposed to help grow my gift and honor what it is and not feel like it's used. I think that every creative, if you're listening to this, has had that experience of like, man, am I here because people in leadership see me for me, or am I here because of what I serve and the gift that I can bring? And I think that that was something that I had struggled with a lot in my younger days in ministry. And that's something that has helped me frame my perspective now when people join our worship team of like, man, there's a struggle of like, if you're a worship leader and you work at a church, you're trying to, our entire church is volunteer based. So
Mm-hmm.
we have volunteers in every position as far as musicianship and singers. And so you look for like, man, I need to fill these spots. But it's also like, man, how am I actually pouring into people and pastoring people well? And I think that when I was younger, I was really disgruntled. I mean, I've worked full time in ministry since I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
So, being a part of church my whole life. And then now at 16, I'm seeing behind the curtain. I'm in the kitchen. I'm seeing all the fires of everything. And I think that there was
Mm-hmm.
so many times when I was young and I was like, oh, like this isn't how it's supposed to be. And I think that my journey of that was at first was super judgmental because I was like, how dare you do something like this and you be in leadership in ministry, and then you grow up and then you make the same mistakes. And then you're like,
Right.
oh
Yeah.
God, like,
Yeah.
Lord, help me unlearn the things that I learned and the practices that I had. And I think that through the years, having to reframe my mindset of like, okay, I've been under lots of different kinds of leadership that are super unhealthy and now extremely healthy. And
Yeah.
I get to take from both experiences what not to do and what to do.
Yeah.
Uh, and learning how to love people beyond their gift and not utilize people just because of that. And just to see, I think that oftentimes as worship leaders and creatives, we've seen the misuse of our gift and people seeing us more as building blocks instead of people with personalities and dreams
Mm.
and goals in our own lives and
Mm-hmm.
outside of our gifts. And I think that now being able to love people in that way, it really helps heal.
Mm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's we could go on for days about all the things that we've seen happen in ministry, and it really is people being people and giving people the grace
Mm-hmm.
um, to mess up and learn their footing. And I
Yeah.
think that that took lots of years for me. That took going to counseling. That took
Yeah.
forgiveness. I mean, I have a song on this record called Manasseh, and if
Yeah.
you listen to it, there's actually an intro, and I kind of get into a bit of my experience with ministry and how I was carrying a lot of heartbreak for a long time,
Yeah.
and bitterness truly, and having to honestly let the Lord break into that. And man, it is the greatest gift to give anyone else and to
Mm.
yourself to forgive and to let it
Mm-hmm.
go and just to see how Christ sees the church
Mm-hmm.
now. And I'm so fortunate. I'm a part of such a beautiful church here in Dallas, Texas called Shoreline
Mm-hmm.
City. And I always talk about, like, if you hear me talk about it, I just gush. And I think that it's
Mm.
not from this stance of like, oh, my church is so much better than any other church, but I'm like, man,
Yeah.
it's possible to be a part of a ministry that is happy, that's healthy, that raises up Christ-like leaders, that we're not a perfect church, but we strive to
Yeah.
just love Jesus and love people is the best of
Yeah.
our abilities. And the way that I've seen that replicated, the like how you love someone else and that be the chain reaction has been stunning. So
Yeah.
now I'm like on the mountaintops. I'm like, guys, it's possible. I always
Yeah.
thought that to work in ministry, you needed to be downtrodden. You needed to be
Huh.
like
Yeah.
hunched over. I'm carrying
Yeah.
my cross. And I'm like, those things, it is definitely I wrote this song not too long ago, and I said in one of the lines in the song, it said, it's not always been easy, but it's been better. And
Yeah.
I think that that's like the life
It's
that we
good.
choose with Christ. Like external things are always going to happen, but we have a better outlook. We have a better way. Like we get to live
Yeah.
out fruits of the spirit and be so plain. Anyway, I'll talk forever.
Mm-hmm. No, that's
You
it's
please.
great. I actually, part of my story really quickly is that I was a worship pastor for 5 or 7 years and then was was not in that church for about 10 or 15 years, but now I'm back there. It's like I'm back
Wow.
not on staff, but I'm just back serving and I'm just having the time of my life with this
I
whole
love
different
that.
perspective. And trust me, this is a church which brought me through probably the most painful season of my life. I
Totally.
could attach all these negative memories to my experience there, but somehow, press through that and have this renewed kind of zeal. And I want to pour encouragement into my pastors and
Yeah.
tell them, like,
It's
you know what?
beautiful.
You're so awesome. You're so great because I just know what it's like to have, wanted that as a minister,
Yeah.
and just to be able to pour that out. So it's cool to be able to have that kind of healed and refreshed and revived outlook that is a part of our churches that we're in. So you were
That's so
mentioning about your
beautiful.
songs, and I want to talk about your last album called Church. Is it called Church or The Church? I just can't remember now.
Just
Uh,
church.
just
I
Church.
love
We're
I
looking at it
love
right here.
I love a
There we
one
go.
word.
Just
There we
one
are.
thing. Let's just stick with the simple thing. And is that actually your church, or did you find a beautiful church to
No,
put?
that is
That
literally my
is it.
church.
Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
I wish I could just zoom that up, but I don't want to wreck my beautiful little design here. So, but these are all the songs, beautiful. You must have it must evoke like memories and just emotion when you see yourself sitting behind that place, just with your story and your life and how much that place has affected you. So, and then this
Man,
song, let's just click into this song. Now, Manessa, I think when I first heard that word, I was like, I don't know what that refers to. I don't know what that word. I know I've heard it before, but
no, it's
so
real.
just take us into that. I'm gonna scroll down here and look at some of the words. And you briefly touched on it, but I love this. Just tell us a little bit about what these words are saying.
Yeah, so basically if you listen to the record, there's an intro to this too. Because
Mm-hmm.
I knew I was like, I don't think everybody's gonna catch exactly what I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about if you just have the
Mm-hmm.
word Manasseh. It's like, oh, that's interesting. So this is actually pulled from the story of Joseph. And if you're familiar with the story of Joseph, he just had a lot of things go on in
Mm-hmm.
his life throughout his story. And honestly, some things that were just kind of unfair, but situational and circumstance. And I mean, his brothers sold him into slavery, and then he gets into Potiphar's house, and then he
Yeah.
rises to the top, gets wrongly accused, he's in jail. I'm like, his story is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
his story and the way that his heart stays so pure. I think of like Joseph, and then I also think of like Job. I'm like, man, they really just
Mm-hmm.
had just like this bad string of luck.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I look at all these things, and his story actually ends up with him becoming second in command in Egypt, right behind Pharaoh. And he's now able to provide for the entire nation because he gets these dreams from the Lord. Um, and when my dad came to visit our church, he referenced the story of Joseph because he knew kind of the history that I'd had with ministry, and then how beautiful this place was that I got to be. And Joseph, at the end of his um, kind of turmoil season from the ages of 17 to 30, actually, it was 13 years, which is wild. The Lord gives him two sons, and the first son was named Manasseh, and it means to
Mm-hmm.
forget the suffering of my father's household.
Hmm.
So when my dad walked through the halls of our church, he looked at me and he was like, with tears in his eyes, he's like, Anna, this is your Manasseh. And
Wow.
Manasseh just means to forget. And
Yeah.
in the context of Joseph, he goes through this basically this narrative of he forgives his family. Like when he sees them, they're so convinced he's going to kill him when he makes himself known to them. But the
Mm-hmm.
contrary was him being like, come close. Like the Lord used what you did, not only for me to be able to provide for our nation, but for me to be able to provide for you and family. And then he gets a second son named Ephraim, which means to be fruitful in the land of my suffering. So Joseph goes through this period where he forgives, he forgets, and then he's made fruitful. And I look
Hmm.
at my church as this my Manasseh, that it was so healing to me that so many of the things that I had suffered with or struggled with, or the limps that I thought I'd walk with forever, or the lenses that I thought I'd see ministry, they got to be healed. And when you're healed, you look back at things differently. You're able to take things into account a little bit differently and not be able to like hold those offenses. So the song and the chorus of the song says, this is my Manasseh, you've caused me to forget. Your goodness has washed over all the pain of my past.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my Manasseh, you've caused me to forgive. Like in all my broken places, you're rewriting what's been written. And just basically thank you for Manasseh. Like thank you for this gift that you've given me, that I now don't have to carry the things that I thought that I would carry my whole life. Because it's one thing to be healed from something, and then there's another thing to be able to let it go and to be able to move
Mm-hmm.
on. And I think that that's just something I'm so grateful for. I'm so grateful for such a healthy community. And I think in ministry, we have the opportunity to be Manasseh for people. We have the opportunity to love them in the places that no one has been able to before, especially as leaders, as worship leaders, with people on our team who've come from different ministries with different backgrounds. We don't know like the hurt and the pain that they've
Mm-hmm.
experienced,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to be the conduits of love for them and to walk them into a season that's healing, and life giving.
Mm-hmm. So great. This
Yeah.
morning I was looking at some of your songs, and I was listening to Take It to Jesus, which I know is a little bit of an older song, but I just thought it was so beautiful, the lyric and the melody, but it was like you're taking someone who has got some real questions, some real pain, some real, and it's not like, oh, here, just pray and it'll, and Jesus will just take care of it. It's there's more of a like a slowed down process. Could you just even take me into the heart of this song? I know it's not from your latest album, but it just sort of
No, I
connects with
love
that
it.
kind of like, let's be real, let's walk with people, let's so I'd love to hear a little bit of that.
Yeah, so
Hmm.
I actually wrote this song for one of my best friends whose boyfriend passed away very
Aw,
suddenly with
yeah,
no like pre-existing conditions, and it was one of those big question marks of what happened and how could this have happened.
yeah,
And I think that so many of us can relate to that when you're like staring grief in the eyes, but you've gone to ministry school and you know all the scriptures and you know Jesus, but you're still sitting there with so much pain and so much grief. Like the last thing
hmm.
you want to hear is like, God's got a plan. And it's like, yes, I know my soul knows that God has a plan, but right now I'm devastated.
Yeah,
And it's like how to manage that. And I think
right.
that I kind of went to the Lord and was like, God, what do you want me to say to her? Because I
Hmm,
literally have no words. And I mean,
hmm,
like that first
mm-hmm,
line of the song being like, I have no idea what to say right now. It was literally just actually from a text
hmm,
that I had sent her.
hmm.
And and it was just this idea that, man, we don't have all the answers, and there are some things that we will never know on this side of heaven. But the beauty is the creator of the universe, God of Psalm 139, that fashioned and formed you in your mother's womb, that is with you when you make your bed in hell, it's with you on the mountaintops. It has you have the ability to run into his presence and just lay it at his feet. And it's also this song kind of speaks to the power of presence and how
Hmm.
sometimes I think in ministry or in leadership we try to give people so many answers and so
Yeah,
much comfort when
yeah,
really the greatest thing we can do is sit with
yeah,
them
yeah.
and bring them to the feet of Jesus. I think of
Mm-hmm.
Mary and Martha when they sat with Jesus and Jesus wept with him. Obviously, it's the shortest scripture verse in scripture. Is probably the first one I learned. Jesus
Mm-hmm.
wept, and it just shows that God not only is this miracle worker and he ends up bringing Lazarus back to life, but he sits with you and he sympathizes with you and he
Yeah,
empathizes with you and understands your pain.
yeah.
And I just kind of love that characteristic about the Lord. And that song is really just like, hey, I know somewhere that I can't promise you that you're going to feel different. I can't promise you that we're going to understand why this happened, but I can tell you that at the feet of
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, you're going to feel better. And there's
Mm-hmm.
only one person that can make you feel better in a moment like this. So that's really the
Mm-hmm.
heart behind Take It to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It's been super beautiful to see people's responses and how they've been able to. I love like people often tell me that they're like, hey, I experienced like a friend was going through some grief and all these things and I had no idea what to say, so we sent them this song. And that just means the absolute world to me because that was really what it was written for. It was me not knowing what to
Yeah,
do or say
yeah,
and the Lord giving us this song to be able to
yeah.
share with people.
I love that word presence. Just offering your presence without needing to fill it with an answer is a beautiful
Mm.
word, and I think a lot of us in church ministry could really heed that word. My wife is actually a clinical counselor, so while I sit
Wow, I
and
love
edit
it.
chord charts, she sits and and so often we have these conversations with my wife where we're so frustrated when we hear others, especially in the Christian world, just jumping to like answers and just sort of simplifies our lives so much. And she's constantly saying, can we just like sit with someone in pain.
Yeah.
Just acknowledge it, but don't try to fix it, right?
Yeah.
So that's the tendency sometimes in church, is we feel like maybe that validates our faith if we just have an answer to fix the
Totally.
problem so quickly. And you really brought that out in your song. Just a more of a patient presence is very
Man.
beautiful. So
Thank you so
so
much.
yeah, really good. So anyways, I mean, we can't talk through all of these songs, but I definitely wanted to highlight this. Just came out, what was it, in the last couple of months? How recent did
Yes.
this album come?
It came out August 11th, so
All
it's
right.
been just about a month.
Oh, beautiful. Well, we have all the charts for, I think that's at least most of the songs here, and the chord charts. The chords are all lined up right over the right syllable, the right chords. And
Love it.
I
It's
don't know if there's
perfect.
any minor seven, flat sevens in there, but if there are, we'll find them. And love all that. Well, thank you so much for sharing your life, your story, and just the vibrancy that you bring, and the is great. It's been a wonderful conversation, and
Oh my
super
gosh.
inspired. So it's good.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you guys do. You resource the
Yeah.
church so beautifully. You resource me with my own songs sometimes, and I'm like, what is this?
Yeah, right.
I'm like,
What was that
listen,
lyric?
it's so real. I'm like, what chord did I play there
Yeah,
again? No,
we'll find
it
it. We'll
helps us
find
all.
it.
It helps
Okay.
us all. So thank you.
All right, Anna. Well, this has been a beautiful time. Thank you. And please, if you are listening, take time to go to Spotify and listen to her beautiful music, and also come, and you can find all the charts and praise charts. So we'd love to be there for you as you continue making music for the church. All right. Thank you
Oh.
very much. This is Ryan Dahl and Anna Golden signing off from Praise Charts. We'll see you again.